MIDI can open up a whole new world of opportunity for your pedal board, but it can also feel equally as intimidating to jump into. I hesitated to jump into MIDI for a long time because I felt like it would just be too overwhelming and complicated, but I've quickly found that it actually can be the opposite and it can really simplify things a lot. So I want to walk through how I'm using MIDI to make my life a lot easier and how I think it can simplify your workflow a lot as well. Now, there's a million different ways that you can use MIDI, and one of the more popular ways, especially in the worship space, is to make song-specific banks. And each of these banks are customized to that specific song to have exactly the right parts that you'll need at exactly the right moments. But I don't want to do that. Instead, I want to use MIDI in a more flexible way that'll still give me the sounds that I need at a moment's notice, but will also keep my time spent programming to a minimum. I want it to just melt into the rest of my board so that everything communicates and works together really cohesively. Now, as far as my board goes, the three effects that I want to set up with MIDI are going to be reverb, delay, and overdrive. And for the MIDI switcher itself, I'm going to be using the Morningstar MC6 Pro, which, by the way, massive thank you to Morningstar for sending this over to feature in today's video. By the way, if you're brand new to MIDI, you can think of this MIDI switcher like a TV remote, where it can control other pedals, other pieces of equipment, even programs on your computer like Ableton. And as long as it's programmed to the right channel, you can really make any kind of change you want for each individual pedal, as well as multiple pedals at the same time. The first of which, though, is going to be reverb. And for today, I'm going to be using my Strymon Big Sky, but a lot of these workflows and concepts that I'm going to talk about really should transfer to pretty much any other reverb pedal out there that can accept MIDI. I have a really simple setup though. If you've seen my deep dive video going through my Big Sky presets, you'll know that I like to cluster different sounds in groups of 3 from lowest to highest amounts of wetness and decay. So I'm using these 2 buttons furthest to the left to basically allow myself to scroll through all of these presets a little bit more easily. So each tap basically just goes through all of these different presets, but I can also hold this down and you can see that it scrolls through these a little bit more quickly. The nice thing is I'm not as stuck as I was before in groups of 3, and I can access way more presets with just one push of a button. So right now I actually have expanded to 6. So it's a lot easier to navigate through different presets with just the push of a button, which is great because I find that I really like different flavors of reverb, and it's nice to kind of mix and match. So what I've done is I've basically set up 6 in a row from lowest to highest, mixing in a couple of different presets together. So starting with this Bloom 1, this is kind of my driest of the presets that I like to use. And I basically have 2 pages or 6 different presets that as I keep ascending and going higher and higher, these get wetter and add a little bit more decay, all the way up until Cloud 3, which I've kind of set to be my highest and generally my swell setting. But the way that I'm going to use this is almost like gain staging. I'm basically in real time going to add more or take away reverb for really whatever the song needs. So here's what these sound like in action. What's nice too is I still have all of the buttons available on the Big Sky. So let's say maybe I'm in this float 2 setting, which is actually one of my favorite kind of general lead sounds. And I want to quickly engage a swell setting. Maybe I have a swell that's coming up really quickly. I can still just hit the C button since I know that this is my swell setting. And as soon as I'm done with that, I can really easily just jump right back to the A preset. Now, delay looks a little bit different. It's not as straightforward as the 2 reverb buttons look, but it's just as simple and still gives me all the flexibility that I need. So If you've seen my deep dive video on the timeline, you'll know that I like to set that up just like my reverbs. So for my main workhorse delay, I like to use tape and basically have a low, medium, and high setting for my eighth note delays as well as my dotted eighth delays. And I've managed to squeeze everything that I need into this one button here. It works pretty similarly to the reverb buttons, but you'll see it basically will just cycle between different presets. So I have 6 different sounds on here, and then once I get to 6, it just circles back to 1. And as I cycle through these presets, you'll see that I'm moving up from low to high for my eighth settings, and then it'll do the same for my dotted eighth settings. So I didn't feel like I needed 2 buttons for delay because I find that I change my delay sounds a lot less frequently than I do for my reverb sounds, as well as my overdrive sounds too. So really for about 90% of the time, I'm on my dotted eighth medium setting. This is also kind of my go-to sound. But for the 10% of the time that I do need to have a quick change to another preset setting, I'm still totally covered because you probably noticed as I cycled through all of these, all of them are assigned to the A preset right here, which means that I have the B preset available to have whatever secondary preset I want assigned here. So if I want something kind of fun, like this tremolo setting, I can have that. But as I scroll through some more of these, I have some fun sounds set. I have some more standard delay types set too. So for instance, if I'm using an eighth sound and I need to have a dotted eighth sound to swap pretty quickly between, I can also very easily have that programmed as well. So this is kind of what I mean by melting my MIDI switcher in with the rest of my board. I really like having the flexibility to make some really easy one button press switches on the MIDI switcher to quickly get some of the sounds that I'll need. But I also have easy options that really work together with the switcher on the pedals themselves too. Now, I mentioned that I did have some tricks up my sleeve, and one of these is this BPM set button here on the bottom right. The MC6 Pro has some really cool functionality when it comes to MIDI clock and even just sending BPM to any of your pedals. So you can see here, when I press this BPM set button, this actually takes me to another page. And I've quickly just thrown in a set list of 4 songs. So I've got Holy Forever, Take You at Your Word, Glorious Day, Great Things. And you can see when I press any of these, it starts sending the BPM for each respective song. So I have 72 for Holy Forever. Then maybe I go into Glorious Day for my second song. I can very quickly send the right BPM for that. You can also get really granular with exactly the right BPM you need to dial in, because every once in a while, for some reason, you get one of those songs with a BPM of 0.5 or 0.25, like Take You at Your Word, which you can't see here on the controller, but in the editor on my computer, this is actually set to 86.25. So depending on how you want your taps to be as well, you can divide it in half and get really specific here too. But I like this a lot because it's really quick to just come to this page, select the next song, you can go right back, and all of your presets stay exactly the same as they were. So nothing is going to get reset or changed. You can see I'm still on timeline 2. My other settings have all remained the same. So it allows you, when you're switching from song to song, to really quickly come here, hit the next song, go back, and boom, you're ready to go with the right BPM. Right now I'm just sending the MIDI clock to my timeline, but if I had other time-based effects too, I'd be able to send it to everything all at the same time. But let's say that maybe you're going to change up the tempo on the fly, or maybe your church doesn't use a click track. You can also go to this page and use this tap tempo button. So as I tap here, you can see that you can just tap in whatever tempo you want. Let's say I just tapped in 90 BPM. I can go right back. But let's say that maybe you also show up to rehearsal, and let's say your worship leader wants to do Glorious Day, but they don't want to do it in 110 BPM. They want to do it in 120 BPM instead. So what you can do here is you can hold the tap tempo button and you can actually just dial in the exact BPM you want. So we can just hold this increase button, get it to 120 BPM, save and exit, and it's gonna send exactly the right BPM that we want. And again, it'll persist through the whole song. Now, bringing us back to the timeline, something really cool about this is the MIDI clock is global. So you can see as I'm changing between these different presets, it's going to remain the same BPM no matter what. So I can really easily recall any types of delay sounds that I want, and I don't need to worry about maybe a different BPM being saved to those particular sounds. I know that everything is going to be in time. So reverb and delay are pretty common to see with MIDI, but you don't normally see overdrive all too often. And this Jet Pedals Lamb is totally taken to the next level with MIDI. Normally you can only access 3 presets as well as the live mode, so kind of like 4 presets on its own, but with MIDI you can access up to 100 different presets. And with how much you can tweak things and change things on this pedal, you can basically save a library of all kinds of different overdrive sounds. For me though, I really have 3 overdrive sounds that are kind of my go-to, and similar to the workflow of my other pedals that I've talked about, I like to have a low, medium, and high overdrive sound to quickly change between. I wanted to get a little more specific with how I dialed this in though, because for overdrive, I often find myself going back and forth between different sounds much more often than I do with something like the timeline, where I could easily cycle through my favorite sounds. I had to get a little more creative with how I dialed this in, but again, I found this to be really simple. I can get any type of sound that I need with just a button press. You'll see I'm a big fan of that too. I don't love double tapping or doing a long press to make quick changes, because honestly, I want to spend as little time as possible looking down at my board making changes so that I can spend more time engaged with my church and worshiping. So the way that I have this set up on the MC6 Pro is this button up here just toggles between the low gain and the medium gain sound on the Lamb. And you can see the color changes from purple to red when I change between these two sounds. And it's worth noting too, I love the screen on the MC6 Pro. It's really nice to have some more visual feedback with colors. So I love that I can tie the colors together for whatever overdrive setting I'm on. I just have a little bit more confidence that I'm on the right setting and I can just get back to focusing on my playing. But like I said, these are my low gain and medium gain sounds, so I can quickly go back and forth, jump between these two different sounds. But for the high gain sound, I actually have this dialed in on the Lamb in its live setting. And basically what the live setting means is when this preset switch is not selected, these knobs are active, and so whatever is dialed in is what you're gonna hear. So basically how this works is I can really quickly jump between whatever gain stages I want with just one push of a button. So for instance, right now I have my low gain queued up and ready to go. If I wanna jump back to my low gain, I just exit live mode, and now I'm back to my low gain. But let's say I'm in my high gain and I wanna go to my medium gain. All I need to do is hit the button here on the MC6 Pro, and it automatically jumps to medium gain and it pulls up the preset. So it pulls me out of live mode. And again, if I want to go from medium to high, all I need to do is go back to live mode. If I want to go back to stage 1, I'm in my low gain and it automatically pulls it up. So this is a really nice way. Again, it is kind of melting together the MC6 Pro with the rest of my pedal board. Everything just takes one button press, but I have all of the flexibility that I need to quickly pull up whatever sound. I could even use this live mode to be something different than a high gain overdrive. Maybe if I'm gonna use a different guitar, or I just want something that's gonna have a totally different sound, I could just dial it in real time with these knobs and then access that whenever I want. And on top of all of this too, you can see this top right button, the last one that we haven't talked about yet, is a boost setting. So the Lamb also has an onboard clean boost as well. So I've got a really simple setup here that basically just toggles the boost on and off. So you can see, again, with the visual feedback, it's really easy to see when it's on or off. But you'll see this button here starts flashing when the boost is engaged, and I can really easily just turn it off. Normally you have to do a double tap on the Lamb to engage the boost. Maybe it's just me, I'm just not a fan of the double taps or the multi-press buttons, and you're probably seeing that reflected in how I have this all set up, because again, everything is just a simple button press and it pulls up pretty much exactly what I need. And honestly, as far as the programming itself goes for the MC6 Pro, all of these are very simple to set up. I'm honestly only scratching the surface for everything that this can do. But again, I kind of wanted to make this more of an entry-level, easy setup that you can replicate for your own workflow. But bringing us back to the boost, it's great that it is separate from whatever gain stage that I'm on. So like right now, I'm on the medium gain. I could engage the boost here and add that on top. But let's say I'm in my low gain and I wanted to engage a boost. I could easily add that in here too. You can even add the boost on when you are in the live mode. So whatever my high gain or my third preset is gonna be, I can add the boost in here as well, and it'll add that boost on top. So here's what that sounds like in action. But like I mentioned before, my goal with the MC6 Pro and with MIDI in general is I don't want to use it in isolation. I don't want to be too locked in and restricted by the sounds that I have programmed, where it becomes kind of a headache if I need to change things up on the fly or access different sounds at a moment's notice. I want it to combine with the rest of my board and also enhance the way that I use each of these other pedals on their own. I did mention earlier too that I made a couple of deep dive videos on the Big Sky and the timeline, so I'll have those linked right here. I basically walk through my workflow and how exactly I get the types of sounds that you've heard in this demo. So feel free to click or tap right up here to check out those videos, and I will see you over there.